while we bring up a public hearing application for development approval, a landscape plan 3400 Polo Drive, given
No,
the time constraints that we have.
it's fine.
This would be the clock.
Yes. Mayor, I'll just give a 2-minute explanation of how we got here.
Very good.
Okay, so, at the last commission meeting, there was some confusion over their 2 oil palms, as to whether the plans called for those to be removed or to leave them where they are. And so the commission, agreed that, the landscape architect would come into the town manager and we would confirm that. And, but there was some confusion. It seemed like we left thinking that those royal palms were going to stay in, when in fact the plans did show that they were to be removed. And so at that point in time, I felt like it needed to come back to the commission because they were planning on removing them, and we had some concern about that at the previous meeting. So that's why we're here today.
Very good.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Okay, so the plan was approved first go around months ago, right? So then, like you said, there was a question about 2 royal palms that sit pretty much in the middle of the lawn. I don't know if in the middle of the lawn space, that the trunks are so wide, they kind of create almost like a really tall wall that separates this part of the property to this area here. It's just kind of like it's in the wrong, they're kind of in a really bad, they're beautiful palms, but they're in the wrong place. So when we had to change the driveway to a circular driveway from the parking court, it eliminated a Sylvester palm here and here to keep the existing ficus tree. So when this new driveway, circular driveway, was designed and implemented, we had to take that Sylvester palm and the other one out. So this one is closer to the house, and it flanks the side of the house here, and there's another one that flanks the house on that side over there. So I had to rework a lot of the landscaping on this area here, because now I need it to, it didn't work anymore without the, I had to eliminate all the landscaping here because of the new opening. Everything had to shift. So when I reworked this whole front, the required landscaping along the edge, the perimeter of the front property line, the heads of the royal palms can create a lot of damage on everything that we're planting new along the front. And I had to put different trees in over here, smaller trees. So when a palm frond, royal palms are self-shedding. So when a palm frond from a royal palm hits anything underneath it, it's going to smash it and destroy it. Does a lot of damage. So with that said, I created, just so you guys can see it, the 20-foot radius, because a palm frond is like 10 feet wide. So when you got a canopy, they're 20 feet. So these are the two royals that I recommended removing. And here's the little, what you call the destruction zone of and the green is the new material that's going in that will be in the way of the, whatever, it's gonna be hit, whatever the frond falls. That's in the little zone of destruction where it's green. It could hit the Sylvester palm if a frond over on this side hits the Sylvester and the Sylvester's underneath it because it's shorter. We're not gonna put them in at 30 feet because that's a mature Sylvester. We're gonna put them down lower where they kind of complement the house. One of those fronds hitting the Sylvester is gonna, could rip the center, out of it, and it kills the palm.
I'm a little more interested in your vision.
Well, this is a lawn. This is lawn, and this just sits right in the middle of the lawn, the open space, right there in the middle of it. So while, I love those palms, the reason why I had them coming out was first and foremost was for safety. And it really just cut the front yard in half. And the homeowners like to use the front yard with, you know, the grandkids and when they have friends over. And this is, you know, backyard's great and lovely and everything, but this is where you have a communal kind of gathering, neighbors, you know, pass by and they stop and, you know, to have more of a communal feeling, you know, a lot of times they do stuff out in the front yard. The grandkids are gonna ride their bicycles in the driveway, you know, learn how to roller skate and that kind of thing. And this is really where a lot of, you know, those activities can't take place in the backyard. Even kicking a ball, it's probably gonna happen over here because in the backyard they'll go into the, you know, into
You
the
are
water.
preserving the third palm.
This is a group of rubellinis that are just a huge cluster of them. So this actually is a multi-trunk Parotis palm that I'm transplanting from somewhere else because over on the other side of the front yard, on the northeast corner, I wanted to use this one to match what's going on over there. It's a little more symmetrical. Give it a nice, lush feeling and balance on both ends of the property. So and I'm also worried about the Royal Palm fronds hitting that and destroying that after they, you know, relocate this at a pretty nice cost to try to save this, you know, grouping of palms. This is just, to me, the palms are so tall and they're nice, and I usually recommend, or I usually specify Royal Palms when in front of a building or a commercial property, or, when they get so big, they just become more problematic because the cherry pickers can't reach them, they fall at any time, and you could be standing underneath one and you can get either severely hurt, or you can end up, people have gotten killed, when those things hit them. So, there are cases in Miami and commercial environments where people have been hit by fronds and.
I totally agree. Go ahead.
So the homeowners feel very strongly about keeping their family safe and not being, having to stay away from their front yard. The other side is, where their driveway goes to the garage, and sure, they'll have a little basketball hoop or whatever kids do.
Is there a Royal Palm on the north side of the property?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and then there's actually a Royal Palm that's staying here, so
Right.
there's
I thought so.
one.
Okay.
Yeah, there are a lot of Royal Palms around the property. I can count them, there's like so many of them.
You're not removing all of those?
No, these are like the only two that, if this is all lawn and usable space, these two just, and they're so girthy, it's just like you're hitting a stone wall, you're just hitting a wall in the middle of the yard.
Okay. Question?
Is 43, is that another one that's?
That's a small group of rubellini palms that are kind of,
So will those be taken out also?
they're being, I'm taking them out. If while they're doing that, they can find a place in the yard somewhere. But overall, I could show you that this. Let me show you the demolition plan or the disposition plan. So,
Yeah, I do. And Maureen,
yes.
I think we know what the issue is, and I have some concerns, so maybe we should move along.
Okay.
We can address your concerns and the town's concerns. First of all, you've done a great job overall on the property.
Thank you.
You highlighted in your first presentation your, I think you call it, tailored tropical.
Well, that was the wrong, it's more like old,
Well, whatever.
we're keeping a lot of what's staying, a lot of
But
staying.
I think you've tried to fit in the landscaping and keeping with the core district characteristics,
Sure.
okay? your first meeting, you presented, one or two people spoke about preserving these big, tall oil palms. I had the impression from the last meeting they were staying, now they're coming out. I went back to the code, and the code says that, very specifically, that you shouldn't be removing trees of that size. And I've consulted with staff, is my interpretation correct?
Yes, I mean, generally, we try to maintain and keep as much of the existing landscaping.
According to the code, I mean, the code states, if sometime you get a chance to go to section 50.
I saw it.
Okay,
I saw it.
so, I hear your issue, I'm looking at the town's issue, my duty as a commissioner to administer the code according to what the code says. The code does, the code doesn't really want you to remove trees, but you're gonna remove it, locate it to another location within the town, or on the property. That's an option. One of the other options, if you wanna do that, but that's the preferred and recommended, is to put in 2 other trees. And over time, if you took those 2 out,
Mhm.
the mitigating, it's not mitigating, what's the term they use? A mitigation plan satisfactory to the town. So I don't want to see the population of these tall oil palms start to decline. They're gonna decline because of health, disease, age, hurricanes. It's a major characteristic of the core district. We have lots of oil palms, and I hear about the safety issues. Well, maybe I should look at the 2 big oil palms I have on my property, because they could fall in the pool when my grandkids swim. Well, I know a lot of people, properties in Palm Beach, they have big oil palms, and somehow we all deal with it. Cherry pickers, the guy was at my house yesterday, they had a guy climb up, he cuts them off. So, as you can see, I feel strongly about it, but the minimum I would recommend, and this is not really where I want to end up, but I will end up because I'm trying to find some balance between what you want to do and what the code says, is put in 2 other oil palms someplace on the property that are of a decent size. We had a circumstance on Palm Way, across the street close to you. They took down some oil palms when they shouldn't have. They replaced them with 35-foot thereabout oil palms. So I guess where I would come out is, and again, it's not what I really want, but I would be satisfied as one commissioner for you to, I mean, it'd be great if you moved them, but I just can't imagine. Those trees can't be moved.
Those have grown attached to each other at the root. They're so close to each
Oh,
other.
so they are.
It's all commingled.
Okay, so.
So it becomes a little bit more
Okay.
difficult and
In any case,
weight-wise and that.
Let's sum up. I'm finished. My recommendation is, as a commission, and I would want an amendment to your application that would provide for 2 decent sized royal palms someplace on the property. So at least we can keep the population, because every time a homeowner takes out a royal palm, over time, we're not gonna have any royal palms. It's an additive. You know, it's easy for me to sort of say, well, it's only this house. But down the road, every time we make that decision, and it's been made sometimes in the past, so, no more from my end.
I just think that I respect what you're saying, and I just know that once the tree gets so tall, and they get like 60 feet over time, it's still gonna keep growing. The cherry pickers are not gonna reach it, and that's when it becomes a real problem. Now you're depending on them just to the fronds to fall naturally, because they do self-shed.
No,
They clean, they're
I don't mean
self-cleaning.
to argue with you, but yesterday, I have a very tall royal palm, and the fellow, I don't know how he climbs, he's got this belt and he goes up there. Doesn't,
It's with, does he probably uses spikes, and I was just with a palm doctor at my house the other day, and said,
Any
"Don't
case,
three spikes in
we have
your palm."
lots of royal palms throughout the town, and And I don't think their position's gonna be as a town, we said to take them down because, you know, you can't reach as a cherry picker. Maybe that's where we'll end up, but we're not there now, and the code says differently now. So let's just add 2 oil palms someplace in the property. I'm trying to give you,
Okay, okay, I mean, I respect that, I mean,
So
I'm not the decision maker, it's the clients who are, you know, ultimately tell me how I need to move forward, I'm just
okay,
presenting.
so.
They're very concerned, and they did, write a letter, they asked me to read it.
I understand, and I'm sympathetic, but we do have a code, and if, you can ask the homeowners to read the code and tell
I
me.
read the code, it doesn't say they have to stay, that you have to make every effort for them to stay, but that's like when it makes sense, the way that I understand it, when it's not putting lives in jeopardy, and I'm saying, you know, this is a great house, and we've got a lot of lawn to play in, but this is how they feel, do you mind if I read, they asked me to?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, I'm not really good at public speaking, so I'm gonna stutter a little bit and mess it up a little bit, but I'm gonna try my best. He also wanted me to just say that, 22 trees are staying, 5 trees are where palms and trees are being relocated, and just 16 slated for removal, so,
I'm sorry, I heard that statistic from the staff. A tree that's 2 feet high or 5 feet, I mean, a royal palm is different from a little tree.
I know.
So those
I get it.
statistics don't really, it should be a qualitative description, not a quantitative.
Okay, so, good morning, Mr. Mayor and, town commission members. Regretfully, neither my husband, Kevin Clark, nor myself could be in attendance today. We have Maureen Smith, our landscape architect, with you to review the landscape design plan for 3400 Polo Drive as you requested. Understanding that she was called back to discuss 2 extremely mature royal palm trees that are slated for removal. Maureen has visuals for your review explaining why these should be removed from the front lawn of the property. To date, we have agreed to all your design and landscape requests and feel very strongly that these trees need to come down. Over the years, we have noticed that many Gulfstream lots get cleared completely, void of all trees and shrubbery at demolition. Our site will be keeping many of the original plantings, both to the north and south borders, along with keeping a large ficus tree located mid-property. This will ensure to keep the old Florida feel in place. The 2 royals need to come down for the following reasons. Most important is safety for everyone walking, playing, or working or below them on the front lawn. These palm fronds can weigh between 50 to 100 pounds and have the ability to severely injure or kill when they fall. As a family, we do play on our front lawn with our children and our guests. Number 2, the trees are past their prime, are located mid-lawn, and do not work with the newly designed front driveway. We will be replacing many of the trees on site with younger, more appropriately sized trees that are more consistent with the new landscape and can grow old with the house. When the fronds do fall, they will cause damage and destruction to the other newly planted specimens below and in the area. I would like to go on record stating that keeping the trees would be a major liability that the town will need to accept. We have been advised by our current landscaper, Donald Thornsberry, that the trees represent a hazard in that location. Should the commission insist the trees stay in place, we will place full responsibility and liability on the town and the individual members of the commission. Our position should be clearly understood on this matter. Thank you for listening to my letter. We are looking forward to commencing the demolition shortly and improving the 3,400 Polo Drive site. Respectfully, Michelle Clark.
Okay, do you have anything else to add, Maureen?
No.
Okay, I'd like to hear from Joan and Tom, since they live in Coral.
You know, I give you a great compliment on keeping the big tree we asked you to, so I think that's a big win for us. I mean, I consider that a nice specimen tree that's going to be beautiful. As opposed to these 2 palm trees, like they're hooked together. Maybe we can work into, because you have a lot of royal palms on the property anyway, maybe you just put in 2 other trees of some nature to accommodate the greenery of this. I mean, that's my thought. maybe we not make them do the royal palms because they have a lot. Royal palms grow very fast, and I know, but I used to trim mine like, and it's, you know, you get it done, but they are dangerous. You have to listen for them when they come down.
They'll have, after you take down the two, they'll have 4 rounds, just so you know.
4,
Yeah.
yeah. You know, can you replant other ones on the backside?
I can, anything
Okay.
that the board
That's
presents,
what
I
I
can bring
would
to the client.
suggest. I mean, I don't know how you feel, but maybe plant
Would that conflict with what their goal is? I mean, there are places in the property, you're gonna put 2 royal palms, it's not gonna be unsafe.
I mean, I agree with the landscape architect, so the royal palms, depending on where they are, we have a lot of volunteers in town. I had a few on my property, but they were in the public rights of way, or in the utility easement as well. And one we left, and one Splunk took down on behalf of the utility contractor. But they are, I agree, you know, aesthetically, they are kind of jammed in the middle of the lawn of the new home. I mean, we have, Rita and I, even on my own property, have done the mitigating stuff over the years. But I think the best option, you know, because that street's a little bit different than Gulfstream Road, is if you can just, if you want to replant 2 royals, I know the clients don't like them, they don't want any more. Frequently, they're not in vogue. Queen palms are totally out too, you know, I get it. My dad was in the nursery business for 40 years, among our other businesses. But if you can probably locate 2 smaller royals, we know they grow, you know, they'll have, you know, on the front of the property, you know, I think that would probably satisfy the, you know, be in compliance with the code and probably satisfy most, if not all, of the commissioners. What's the standard planting height for what we call a low royal? I mean, we have 20 feet now coming on the truck.
I just specify, I'm doing a church in
Yeah.
Lake Worth, and their code says 12-foot overall, so it's 6 foot of green trunk and then 6 foot of head.
we
And
don't
those
know, I
are
mean-
tiny, they don't look like royals yet,
Yeah, I
you
mean,
know?
sitting here right now, I don't, you know, where they have to go and the client's concerns and the fact you moved the driveway and did the tree, personally, I don't have a problem with the planting height being pretty low, knowing they're not gonna really look like a royal for a number of years as a mitigating factor. That way, at least you have them on there, and it's in compliance with an alternative under the code. If you have a 12 or 15-foot planting height, I don't know.
I'm not really, I'm sorry.
What's available, go ahead, yeah, go ahead.
I'm not really sure the requirements of the code, because you guys don't really have, like, you need so many palms and trees per
I mean, we would
1,000
just,
square feet.
I mean, we would just set a parameter or plant, you know, if we say 2, you know, young royal palms to be located near the boundaries in the front of the home, we would just set a planting height not to exceed X, you know, 20 feet. You know, obviously, we don't want we don't want a seedling, and we'll leave it up to the discretion of the town manager, you and the client to sort of work it out. I don't think it would be prohibitively expensive at this point. You know, you've already done a lot and spent a lot. I'm just trying
Yeah,
to
they're putting in
help out, yeah, a
100
lot.
trees.
Yeah, I
Fucking
know,
like
yeah,
100
I know.
trees.
But, you know, the difference is that the levels of canopy,
Sure.
you know, so
I get it.
Okay.
I get it.
I mean, the other observation.
I see both sides of the,
Yeah, I mean, a 20-foot planting height is still not much clear trunk, is it, for a royal, is it, or is it?
it's pretty good. I think
Pretty
a 20-foot overall would probably give you 10 foot of trunk. You know, top frond sticking straight, the one that comes out of the center
Yeah.
is 10 foot. They're gonna kind of bow, so it's gonna
I
be
mean,
a
we know
little
it's
more.
not 60.
Well, they do grow quickly. I'm gonna say, they're pretty,
Very
They'll grow a
Very-
foot to
very-
2 feet
very-
a year.
So you
yeah.
have, so
I mean,
the,
they grow very quickly.
the option is no more royals and 2 alternative trees that may be slower growing and less
But that's-
intrusive.
That's the
or-
whole point of keeping the higher canopy, is what we're talking about, is
Yeah.
that the overhead canopy, which you don't get with everything else, so we're kind of defeating.
Right.
I'm happy with the collected comments, Mrs. Ortwine and Mr. Sam,
All right, so
from my perspective.
Just replace them. with
replace them
something.
with something, or
Or
replace them
do
with
you
2
want royal
smaller
palms?
royals?
You know what, I would do a palm tree that will get tall, but whether it's up to you. I mean, I think royal palms are beautiful, but they
Me
are
too.
maintenance, so I'd probably go with the royal palm, what Tom suggested. Small ones growing up. I don't know, how do you go?
I'm happy with the I'm the driveway guy.
And I'm the front tree girl. We all have our
I'm the
different,
tree hugger.
I am too,
Goes to
that's why I'm in this discussion.
landscape person, I'm the driveway guy. Yeah, small driveways and a lot of cars, it's a pet peeve of mine.
Well, they'll definitely be taking care of their guests on their driveway and their.
Exactly,
Okay.
so.
well, I think we can just.
But Maureen, be sure that they understand, and I'll give you the section of the code. So you have what the code says and why we're ending up with this.
I have it, and
Okay.
I've sent it to them a long
Okay.
time ago.
Okay, it comes,
But I can
it's
take it.
self-explanatory, but
But
it
you can
seems to
take
me
this
that
out.
trees cannot be relocated in town or on the property. I think that there is a vision to this landscaping, to which the property owners have adjusted significantly to our previous request regarding the large tree. I am more sympathetic to the property owners' property rights. Yes, royal palms are a classic feature in Gulfstream, but they are not nearly as so on the south side of Polo Drive. I drove up it yesterday, and I saw one here, one there. At this north end, there are considerably more. And so that's just a rambling thought. I see where you are going with this, I'm sympathetic to it. I don't know if it's a requirement that I would put on the property owner.
If they're required to replace it with 2 Royals, could you find someplace on the south end that might need them, and you can start to like,
That seems to be the way the commission is going on it.
not the south end of their property, but maybe like someplace, in town that needs them, 2 younger Royal Palms that. Now the south end
I
of-
don't think that can be adjudicated here.
Yeah, we can't specifically
Okay,
plan.
I'm just putting it out there,
Yeah,
I'm
we
thinking,
can't
you know,
mitigate in the right of way, yeah.
thinking large, not just their yard.
It's an interesting thought.
I'm okay if they come out, I mean, what would be, if you have to put 2 replacement trees in right now, which you're gonna have to do, what do you think your clients would prefer?
Well, in my opinion, I think that Foxdale Palms look like a miniature Royal. Not in the frond itself, but in the trunk, the little girthy.
Familiar with them,
It's a
yeah?
little Zoftic little trunk, and it's got a nice green nut, you know, it kind of looks like the
They're
Royal Palms'
pretty.
little brother, you
Yeah.
know?
And they can be in clusters actually too.
You can do doubles or triples, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a nice pond, and I use those where I wanna get that very stately look in a residential setting, because it's not gonna outscale.
Can you
The
put
house.
2 of those in here somewhere?
Sure. I
Okay.
mean, that, let me just tell them.
We're looking towards and we're looking for the canopy, of course, to be the front, not, on the back. I think your landscape plan in the back's pretty fine anyway. Okay?
Thank you.
Were we talking about 2 trees
Yeah,
in the
per the
same
code,
area?
your
I think
replacement
Foxtail palms
trees.
are great.
and they
Same
don't-
Same area?
They're great.
In the front of the home, whether
Okay.
you're on the
Okay.
corners or
Okay.
somewhere, and we'll leave it up to staff.
Okay.
And then,
Great.
so it's 2
Thank you.
replacement trees per the code, but don't have to be Royals, I guess.
Thank you
We're
so
looking-
much.
But I would ask, I agree that it don't have to be, but there is a preference, and to the extent that we're accommodating their requests, I would ask them to at least strongly consider Royal Palms.
Okay.
But, just because of the canopy, the height and all that over time.
Thanks for the front.
Good. I think we need a
Sorry.
motion.
Yeah, let's
I said thanks for the front tree.
Okay. All right, we'll make a motion, the application before us, for the amended landscape plan of 3400 Polo Drive, that the 2 existing 60-plus foot Royal Palms may be removed by the applicant, however pursuant to the code. The applicant must plant 2 replacement trees, in the front yard, which would be, we call it east yard, in locations to be determined by the staff and the applicant.
I'll second that.
Ms. Taylor?
Commissioner Lund?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stanley?
Yes.
Commissioner White?
Yes.
Commissioner Orthwein?
Yes.
Mayor Morgan?
Yes. Thank you very much.
Right,
Thank you,
everybody.
thank you so much for your time, appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Maureen.
Okay, we are reconvening now as the Board of Adjustment and continuing that hearing. Randall, you're Prior to, moving forward, I want to make sure the record is clear in regard to the, documentary evidence that the town places in the record. Everything that was in the backup material, which, I referenced earlier, shall be made part of the record, which includes, well, I don't need to go over all of it again, but it includes the denial letter by Rita, the application by Mr. O'Boyle, Joanne O'Connor's letter explaining the position of the town. Everything that is in the backup package today, including a copy of Mr. O'Boyle's appeal, including a copy of his application, which was denied, a letter from Greg Dunham explaining the history of this matter and the position of the town in regard to same. Joanne's letter to Elaine Johnson James, dated May 25th, 2018, and the attachments there too. Also, we would include, importantly, the settlement agreement between the parties, the development agreement, including my letter to Bill Ring dated June 30th, 2017, explaining the town's position in regard to the dock application, which includes the minutes of the September 17th, 2013 meeting of the Town Commission at which the development agreement was approved. As you discern from the presentation, there are two issues before you on this appeal. The first is whether or not Mr. O'Boyle's application fits the definition of dock as set forth in the town code, section 66-1, which has been also made part of the record. I have included as part of the record all of the code sections related to this matter. That section reads, dock is an accessory structure built on pilings over water, no part of which floats on water, and this is the part that the appellant is concentrated on, which is designed or used primarily to provide dockage for and access to one or more boats or water vessels for private use. Mr. O'Boyle's plans describe part of his structure as a promenade and 5 feet of such structure as a dock. He states he will not use the promenade as a dock. Nevertheless, it is all part of the same structure built on pilings over the water. The town's position is it is therefore a dock, whether he uses it to dock boats or not, and its width exceeds the 5 feet width requirement for docks, and it doesn't meet the side yard setback for structures. Even if it wasn't a dock, a structure has required to have a side yard setback. Therefore, as Rita Taylor has determined, the application is in violation of town code, and her decision should be sustained on that basis, and the approval should be denied. Now, in that regard, I would like to, since unexpectedly this has been opened up to testimony, I would just like to ask first Greg Dunham a couple questions, and then Rita a couple questions. Sir. Mr. Dunham, how long have you been a town manager?
35 years.
And in your 35 years, have you, as one of your responsibilities, been to interpret codes of the towns on which you've been town manager?
Yes. I should mention I was a zoning administrator also.
You have been a zoning administrator. And you have submitted a letter as part of the package here today. Do you stand by the opinion that you rendered in that letter?
Yes, sir.
And is your opinion that this application of Mr. O'Boyle is in violation of the town's ordinance relating to the two docks?
Yes, sir.
The reason being that we'll state the reason.
Because it doesn't meet the size, construction requirements, size requirements of the dock that's identified in our code.
A portion of it does, as
A
you
portion
said.
of it does, and the 5-foot depth or width section does not meet the side setback requirements.
All right. Do you agree with Rita Taylor's decision
to deny this application?
Yes.
I'd like to ask Rita Taylor a couple of questions.
Sworn in.
He was.
He wasn't.
She was not.
At first, he can, subject to cross-examination.
You have any cross, Mr. Dunn? So you just testified that the finding that the structure proposed by the appellant was, in your opinion, a dock. However, I'm looking at your letter that's dated May 3rd, 2019, and it says that the town attorney, John Randolph, has provided his legal opinion that it is a dock. So your letter says that it's Mr. Randolph's opinion that it's a dock. Which one is it? Was it your finding or was it Mr. Randolph's finding?
If I were examining that application, I would say that it was a dock.
Okay, I'm not asking you if you were examining the application. Your letter says that it was Mr. Randolph's opinion that it was a dock. You just testified that it was your opinion that it was a dock.
Okay, in the letter that I was provided to you, was a
Correct.
summary and the history of this, and so therefore that would include Mr. Randolph's opinion.
Okay, so it's Mr. Randolph's opinion that led you to find that the structure proposed by the appellant is a dock. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, you did, again, if I were examining this application without that recommendation or opinion, that would be my opinion.
I'm talking about for the
Yes,
basis
sir.
of the statement in your letter.
Yes, sir.
He's already answered that.
Okay, thank you.
It's his opinion as well as counsel.
And given that testimony, may I ask some questions of Mr. Randolph?
No, that's inappropriate. No. We've granted significant leeway on questioning of witnesses in a hearing that really does not allow for it, and I'm not going to have attorneys questioning other attorneys.
Mr. Dunham, what was the opinion of Mr. Randolph?
Was that application did not meet the definition of a dock.
The application, were you aware that Mr. Randolph reviewed the promenade deck as opposed to the dock area as being separate?
Was I aware of that?
Sure.
Yes.
You were aware that he individually reviewed the area that's elevated as being separate and apart from the other portion that is designated as a dock in the application?
You mean versus the 5 feet?
Correct.
I think he looked at the application in its entirety, which would include both the promenade section and the dock.
Okay, and you know that how? How do you know that he
'Cause that's his
appreciated that there
letter.
were two different elevations?
I read his letter.
You read his letter. And do you have a copy of that letter?
All right, I think we're beating the bush here. Witnesses answered the question.
Okay, thank you very much. I have nothing further for that witness.
Okay, Mr. Randolph, you want to question
Yes,
Ms.
just-
Taylor? Apparently he's been sworn in. Ms. Taylor, I guess I'll swear you in. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you
I
God.
do.
Would you state your name, please?
Rita L. Taylor, town
And,
clerk.
okay, and how long have you acted as town clerk for the town of Gulfstream?
30 years.
And were you a town clerk prior to that anywhere?
I was a total of 45.
Okay. And with the town of Gulfstream as town clerk, have you acted as building official?
Well, you wear a lot of hats when you're the town clerk.
All right.
So I don't know as I ever had the title of building official. But I do review, I have reviewed plans in the past.
Do you review plans and permits that are submitted to the town?
A lot of them I do.
And do you often approve or deny those based upon your understanding of the code?
Yes,
And are you familiar with the application that was made here by Mr. O'Boyle in regard to this dock?
yes.
And I have a letter from you dated March 15th, 2019, in which you thank him for the application, but you indicate that the application violates provisions of the town code. Do you have that letter in front of you, or is it part of your package?
March 15th, right?
Yes. And what was your conclusion in regard to the application? And I'm asking as it relates to the applicable code in the town.
Well, that it did not meet the requirements for a dock, number one, and there's none of the three applications that they put in met any of the side setback requirements.
So, okay, so you made the determination based upon your review of the code that the application did not meet the requirements for a dock.
Absolutely.
Did you make any attempt to differentiate between a dock and a promenade or a deck?
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, the code says what you can build. And it describes a dock. And in the beginning with his applications, that's exactly what he was calling it, was a dock. Although it was a dock that did not meet the town's code.
So you're saying there were previous applications made by Mr. O'Boyle. Did the previous application, was the previous application similar or identical
I have to object,
to what was previously filed?
I have to object to the question. The prior applications are not relevant. The application that is the current pending application before the tribunal should be the only
Well,
relevant.
there was considerable testimony about it under your questioning as well.
I didn't
And
question,
that is the nature of the original applications and as they were modified moving forward.
I did not question about any prior applications.
I believe that the witnesses did talk about that. As I recall, Mr. O'Boyle and Mr. Dunham both spoke about it.
That may have been under the questioning of your attorney.
Yeah,
That wasn't
but
my
you called
question.
them, this was under cross-examination of your witnesses, you called them as a cross, if you will, but it was during your case in chief. So I don't think it's inconsistent, continue.
They weren't questions that I asked, is all I'm saying. They weren't my questions, it's not our position.
Let me show you.
No, I understand, I understand.
If I may, and you know, I have to show you this letter, July 3rd, 2017. And it's a letter to Martin O'Boyle from you, and ask you to indicate what that letter applies to.
Same objection, relevancy.
Yeah, this was in reply to an application in 2017. And it is saying that we reviewed the site plan showing the proposed deck and dock. On receipt of the construction drawings for the deck, we are prepared to process a building permit for the deck. With regard to the dock that is also shown, please be advised that as presented, it is in violation of the Gulfstream Code as follows. Section 66-369, 6 in parentheses, B, provides that no dock shall exceed 5 feet in width. The dock on the site plan is 12 feet wide. Then section 66-369, 6E, states there shall be a minimum side setback of 15 feet from the property line. The site indicates the dock is only approximately 4 feet from the easterly lot line. So apparently this was a permit application that was very similar to the current one.
Except you said you were prepared to approve a deck. Was there something different than the deck that's being described here today in that application?
Well, I'm assuming it's the deck around the pool.
Okay, but that application did not describe the dock as a deck or a promenade.
No, it did not.
Was there a subsequent application made after you wrote this letter?
Yeah, the one that we're talking about was
All right.
dated in this year.
To your knowledge, was there anything different about that subsequent application other than them changing the name of the dock to a promenade? Did they change the name on the current application from a dock to a promenade?
Absolutely. They had two applications, and they called it a dock both times, until the last one came, and it became a promenade.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions. I would like to introduce this particular letter into evidence.
Accepted.
Ma'am, you indicated that in your letter dated March 15, 2019, that the settlement agreement does not apply to structures in the water. You recall that?
Yes,
And you're aware that the settlement agreement contemplated a survey that was then created, and it showed that there could be water structures constructed in the water, right?
yes.
Okay, so isn't it true then that Mr. O'Boyle can construct certain things, those being water structures, in the water?
If such things are described in our code as being permitted.
Okay, and what is it that you're relying upon in your code that prohibits the construction of a deck over the water?
Because there's no description for that. All there is it talks about is a dock, and it's very precise in what a dock looks like and how it's built. And he even describes a dock in one of his designs, or two, maybe. And there's no description for a deck except around a swimming pool.
Ma'am, you're familiar with a definition for a deck in the code? Or not?
Well, I think I don't know as it's defined in the actual definitions of the code, but the code speaks to decks around pools, and it also talks about how high off the grade they can be and how far away they have to be from the property line.
If I understand your testimony correctly, you're testifying that you believe that there is a description of decks in the code that explain that they are around pools. Is that your testimony?
No, not exactly.
What is your
She's
testimony?
she's answered that question.
I don't know that she has.
She did, you asked her where the definition of a deck was, she gave some explanation of it, her interpretation of what was presented in the code, as well as the applications, numerous of them, by this applicant. I think to continue questioning on it is not necessarily appropriate.
Okay. Ma'am, as relating to structures that can be built in the water, you saw that the language said that a deck could be built in the water area. You just testified to that 2 minutes ago, right? You remember that?
No, I don't remember saying that.
Okay, I asked you,
She said that, Mr. Weir.
one of my first questions was, do you recall that when we were discussing the settlement agreement, that there was an Exhibit C that specifically said that some things called water structures may be built in the water area, and that specifically included decks? And you said you recall that.
You were referring to what was in the settlement agreement.
That's right.
And it did state that in the settlement agreement.
Okay, so why can't Mr. O'Boyle construct a deck in the water area?
Because it doesn't meet the size of the dock, which is the water, the structures that are described in the code to build in the water.
Am I understanding your testimony correctly then, that everything that is constructed over the water is a dock?
I believe that it needs to meet the
And you-
specifications of the dock.
Okay.
I think the witnesses have presented considerable testimony in addition to their letters, numerous of them, summaries of meetings and whatnot that you have provided. So I would ask that you finish up this line of questioning.
You indicated that there was some knowledge about prior applications, but your letter dated March 15, 2019 indicates that the letter relates to the application that was delivered March 11, 2019. Do you recall that language in your letter? It's the first sentence.
Yes.
So, and then I heard you testify about prior applications going as far back as 2017 for a dock. And I'm wondering, is your position that once Mr. O'Boyle tendered an application for construction of a dock back in 2017, that every subsequent application that he would tender for any construction over the water is necessarily going to be considered by you to be for the construction of a dock?
Say that again?
Sure, just because he submitted an application in 2017 to build a dock, why does it appear to be your testimony that every subsequent application that he might submit to build anything over the water, you're gonna consider to be a dock?
Objection, that mischaracterizes the testimony of the witness.
Yeah, I agree. And in addition, I think she was indicating that there's the similarity of these applications, and there was a name change. That was the only point. So I would urge you to
rephrase it.
I would urge you to wrap it up. Because I think this has gone on long enough.
Did you-
We need to get the case concluded and deliberation started.
Did you appreciate that the 2019 application had a section that was at 7 foot over the mean water line, as opposed to the prior dock applications being at different elevations? Did you appreciate that difference?
Yes.
Okay. Did you appreciate that there were differences in the accommodations in the promenade and deck area at the higher elevation that would make it not useful primarily for the docking of boats as compared to prior applications?
Prior applications were very similar to this one. I don't know exactly what the difference was in the heights. I don't know as it showed that. But all I considered was that it didn't meet the definitions in our code for any one of them.
So when you're saying that they were very similar, are you indicating that they were both just construction of some structure extending off of the seawall and over the water? Is that your understanding as to how these applications were similar? I'm trying to learn why you thought they were all similar.
Well, they were all built or planned for the same areas, basically. They were, to start with, they were all too wide. They did change in the width as they progressed. But to me, they were going for the same thing every time they were applied for.
Have we now discussed all of the differences that you perceived between the different applications?
Well, as best you can recall right now, and I think she's given a summary of it, and spelled out all their positions in their writings. So I would ask you to bring this line of questioning.
This is my wrap-up question, yes, thank you, Mayor. This is my wrap-up question. Have we now addressed all of the differences that you perceive between the different applications that you can recall today?
The side setbacks, they varied, but they never did meet the code.
You're saying the setbacks were different between the different applications?
Well, since they didn't write what it was on there, and some of them were very small to look at, it appeared to me that they had made an attempt to modify them, but I couldn't, just looking at what I had in front of me, I couldn't tell if they'd modified them enough. The drawings weren't that precise.
Have we now discussed all of the differences between the applications as you recall them today?
Yes, I believe so.
You have the growth.
Anything else?
Just, Ms. Taylor, you were questioned in regard to Exhibit C, and the question that was asked was, didn't Exhibit C allow for docks, decks, and structures to be built over the water? Wasn't there more in Exhibit C than just that? Didn't it follow with the words, as may be approved by the town?
Oh,
Check
absolutely.
to the question, leading.
So, what did that language, as approved by the town, mean?
That it had to meet the town code requirements.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Very good.
I would just state that there's a mischaracterization of the statement, if I may just read that whole sentence into the record. So it says pertinent structures such as decks, pilings, docks, and other structures, open paren, but not another living unit or interior living space, quote-unquote water structures, may be constructed and or installed in the area designated hereon as open quote water, close quote, provided that such water structures are approved by the town of Gulfstream, if applicable, as long as the area designated water remains water. If any portion of the cap property, which is presently submerged, becomes no longer submerged, then such area shall be included in the cross-hatched area. I also just have one objection for the record as to documents that Mr. Randolph had entered, to the extent that he's submitting letters from 2017 and to the extent that they're being utilized to argue or take the position that there is somehow modification of the agreements by virtue of those letters, we object. The settlement agreement specifically, paragraph 29 states that that there are no modifications to the settlement agreement unless they're in writing and signed by both parties.
The objections noted.
Right.
All right, we're gonna now proceed to,
So that was the first point on appeal relating to the application of the code and the town's interpretation that the application did not meet code. Mr. O'Boyle's second argument, which is a little bit more circuitous, relates to his position that the development agreement somehow went further than what was described in the settlement agreement. And I have provided you a copy of the settlement agreement and the development agreement, and I'd like to take you through Mr. O'Boyle's arguments in regard to same and point out the provisions in both agreements that are applicable here. If you will turn to paragraph 35 of the settlement agreement, I know you've got a lot of papers there, but I will point out to you that Mr. O'Boyle relies on that. It's titled Reservation of Rights, and it's on page 14 of the settlement agreement.
Can we just take a quick break or something?
Oh, sure.
take a 2-minute break.